for April 16th, 2024, 7 p.m. It is 7 p.m. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. In the case of emergency, there's an exit in the back of the room. You can go out the door and away from the building, or you can go out the door to my left, down the stairs, and away from the building. Roll call?
Donna Corbin-Sabinski.
Yes.
Kevin Zorda.
Here.
Whoops. Virginia Higley, here. Kelly Hemler.
Here.
Dylan Bridge.
Here.
Nancy Martin.
Here.
Ann Collins, absent. Chris Renaud, absent. Ken Kaufman.
Here.
Okay, I'd like to seat Ken. Two alternates are absent, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6. There's 8 of us, okay. Just trying to figure out how many people are here. Public communications and petitions. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak regarding items not on the agenda? Again, anybody want to speak regarding items not on the agenda? One last time, if anybody wants to speak on items not on the agenda, moving forward. Correspondence, I don't have any extra. Anybody? No? Minutes from the preceding meetings of April 2nd.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of April 2nd, 2024.
Second.
Who was that? Nancy seconded it? Any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, roll call?
Donna Corbin-Sabinski.
Yes.
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ken Kaufman.
Yes.
7 in favor, motion passes. Yeah.
I will make a motion to move the continued public hearing to after new business.
Second.
Ginny seconded it. Any discussion? Roll call? Should go quick, guys.
Donna Corbin-Sabinski.
Yes.
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ken Kaufman.
Yes.
7 in favor, motion passes. Next was the town attorney report, which we have none. So then it's new public hearings, we have none. Old business, 690, IW 697, map 81, lot 9, corner of North Maple Street and Shaker Road. Application for a wetland permit for the development of an indoor self-storage facility with associated activities in the 200-foot upland review area of Freshwater Brook. Pullman Realty LLC, applicant Mark Pollack, owner, map 81, lot 9, I-1 zone. This has been continued from March 19th and April 2nd. Welcome. Could you state your name and address?
Good evening, Rebecca Lee with R. Levesque Associates, located in Westfield, Massachusetts. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Mr. David Goodman, for the proposed self-storage facility at the intersection of Shaker Road and North Maple Street. Last time we were here was March 19th, where we presented the plans. We were continued to allow additional time for departmental comments. Since then, we received engineering comments, and we revised the site plan set and stormwater report and resubmitted. We've also received confirmation that the comments were satisfactorily addressed. So if it pleases the commission, I can go through those comments now and review the changes from the last time we presented. Okay, great. So the first comment here was that the engineering department wanted us to use the 25-year storm event to size the drainage pipes. So we revised our drainage analysis accordingly. In doing so, I'm just going to flip to the drainage plan. So in doing so, we had to separate out the roof leader pipe network system from the runoff from the paved areas and catch basin, just to accommodate, the additional rainfall. So you'll see 2 new discharge outlets into the basin, and those are purely for the roof runoff. The next comment here was regarding the cover. So the engineering department was looking for a minimum of 2 feet of cover over the crown of the pipes. So in order to achieve this, we added a couple more drainage manhole structures to shorten the length to the basin to allow for the appropriate cover. So another comment here was that we'll need the state DOT review after the local approval, which is understood. The next comment here is that they wanted to see the town's standard notes, which have been added. And the detail for the pavement section should include an 8-inch base of processed stone under the pavement course, which it did show, and I can show you that detail as well. This is the last page. So 8-inch gravel base depth. So that concludes the engineering comments, and I think there were a couple additional planning comments, which resulted in the request to not have the town standard notes on all of the sheets, and to relabel the 200-foot wetland upland review area instead of a riverfront buffer, which we can most certainly do. So at this time, that kind of summarizes the comments, and I'd be more than happy to answer any additional comments that the commission may have.
So all the comments were addressed. Just for the record, the applicant did notify the water company of the project being over the aquifer. We'll be sure to pass along APA BMPs when they go through the PZC process. To this date, we had not received any comments or concerns from the water company. And just a reminder that the site is still registered under PA 490. If the property sells before October 1st, there will be a 6% penalty at the sale price. Fire, building, traffic, and engineering were addressed. Last time we were just waiting for the engineering comment, which Ms. Lee went over. And then just the one site-specific recommendation of stormwater detention basin maintenance can be authorized as agent approval for future maintenance projects. And that's all I had.
I have a quick question for Georgie, for staff. I'm just to enlighten me. The property is currently registered under PA 490 for farming. It's legal to put a permanent structure on that property, so it'll never go back to farming, even though it's situated there?
Not necessarily. They could always revert back to farming in the future if they wanted to. They did not sell their development rights, so they're allowed to develop. When they're in the PA 490 program, that's for tax exempt status, so that's all that applies to. It doesn't prevent them from doing development. However, there are certain penalties if they sell or develop before their PA 490 is up.
Thank you.
Kevin? Anybody else? Comments, discussion?
All right, I will make a motion to approve IW number 697, map 81, lot 9, corner of North Maple Street and Shaker Road, application for a wetlands permit for the development of an indoor self-storage facility with associated activities in the 200-foot upland review area of Freshwater Brook. Pullman Realty LLC applicant, Mark Polick owner, map 81, lot 9, I-1 zone, with the following site-specific conditions: that the stormwater detention basin maintenance may be authorized as an agent approval for future maintenance projects on the finding there will be no adverse impacts to the Freshwater Brook.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Jenny seconded it? Any discussion? No, seeing none, roll call?
Donna Corbin-Sabinski.
Yes.
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ken Kaufman.
Yes.
7 in favor, motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Good luck
much
with your
for your
project. Okay. Get all this stuff. So, next is new business, which DPN 2024-0404, 33 Sandpiper Road. It was an application for a determination of a permit need per section 8.8 for a 12 by 24 shed. Stephen Kara, parent, applicant owner, map 89, lot R13, R44 zone. And I understand they withdrew?
Yes, the applicant withdrew.
Okay, perfect. Well,
So
okay.
do we keep it or do we?
You don't have to keep them. It was when we were doing the review of the plans, we found that it was more in the upland than it was in the wetland. It was hard to tell because the plan submitted wasn't really to scale, and then because of the way the agent approval was written, then I could do the building permit.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, next on our agenda is IW 696, 85 and 100 Bright Meadow Boulevard and 113 Brainerd Road. Application for a wetland permit for regulated activities in connection with the development of a sports complex and associated uses. Fast Track Realty, applicant, Mass Mutual Life Insurance Company, owners of 85 and 100 Bright Meadow Boulevard, and John Rand, Patricia C. Ferreira, owners of 113 Brainerd Road, map 35, lots 44 and 220, and map 36, lot 237, BR and R33 zones. Okay, so can I have a motion to open the public hearing?
I will make a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
What?
Sorry.
Kevin, okay, Nancy seconded it? And it is, what time is it? It is 7:12. Roll call, please.
Yep. Donna Corbin Savinsky.
Here.
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley. Yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ken Kaufman.
Yes.
7 present. So the rules, the purpose of the public hearing is to allow the public to speak regarding the application, to raise concerns for or against the application. The agents and staff cannot answer any questions or concerns at this time. Statements from the public are for the purpose to be considered in deliberations during a regular meeting. As this is a continuation, we will start with the applicants, and then the public will be called to speak regarding the topic of the public hearing and areas of concern for the inland wetlands and our regulations only. Then we'll hear from the staff and the agents. Please do not bring up items related to other agencies, commissions such as P&Z, as we can only base our decision on IWWA rules and regulations. All those wishing to speak should use the sign-up on the sign-up sheet. When called upon, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Everyone will be given 5 minutes to speak, and if needed, we'll go into a couple rounds. If at any time the hearing becomes unruly or unmanageable, I will call a recess. So the applicants are seated? Hi.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. For the record, Carl Landolina, Fahey and Landolina, Windsor Locks, representing the applicant, Fast Track Realty. Usually have a lot of people up here with me. I don't know, they've abandoned me apparently.
They gave up.
That's not a good sign. But as you know, George Logan from REMA Ecological Services is our soil scientist, wetlands biologist, and 20 other titles he has after his name. He'll be up here soon enough. Alan Hubbard from Athletic Fields of America is our supplier for the synthetic turf that we intend to use on these fields. Andy Borgia is a principal at Fast Track Realty, LLC. He's in the audience. And John Furman from VHB is our project engineer. I think primarily you're going to hear from myself and George this evening, but obviously the whole team is here in case you have any questions. So I thought I'd start off with a couple of more or less, I don't know, at least one housekeeping matter. And I know it was brought to the attention of the chair and maybe the other members, and that had to do with notice under 22A-42F, which is essentially a mirror of 8-3I under the zoning statutes. And it has to do with notice to public utilities and the Department of Public Health for applications which are going to take place in an aquifer protection area. So until fairly recently, and you know, as you get older, fairly recency has another connotation. But you gave notice to both Connecticut Water, which is still this way, and or any public utility, and the Department of Public Health by sending a certified letter, return receipt requested. So we did that. We sent a letter to Connecticut Water Company. They obviously received it because we've been in discussions with them from the start, even before the application was, and they have been at several of these meetings, and I know that Ms. Baldwin, I believe, is here again this evening. I saw her sign up, so I'm sure she has some comments for you as well. The issue was related to notice to the Department of Public Health. So, as I'm sure you're aware, but I'll state it for the record in any event, notice under 22A 42F or 8-3I to the public utilities and the Department of Public Health is the same in terms of its legal significance as personal notice to any abutter, which we also do under your regulations, all right? So those went out, and we had, frankly, a lot of them came back, so, our all we can do is send them. We can't, we can't make the horse drink if he doesn't want to, so to speak. So fairly new is a requirement, and it's a statutory one, there's no doubt about that, that we provide on a notification form there's like 19 or 20 questions, and we send that electronically to the Department of Public Health. We didn't do that initially. We did it not too long ago, so they have that information. But again, since the notice requirement under those statutes is no different than notice to abutters, it's called personal notice. It's not constructive notice. So if we have proof of actual notice that they actually got the form or they're aware of this process, then that doesn't deprive you of jurisdiction. If we messed up on the sign or something happened with the notice in the newspaper, that's an entirely different thing. That's constructive notice intended to go out to the entire world, whether they see it or not, then that's a jurisdictional issue for you. Failure of or an issue with personal notice is not a jurisdictional issue. The only one who can raise that would be the person who it's directed to. But actual notice is evidence that they know about it. In this case, so I went on, I never got the green card back, but I'm not surprised because I'm still getting green cards back from an application I made to you guys 6 months ago on something that's already been closed. So I know what happens to green cards. But I went onto the tracking website at the United States Postal Service, and the letter to the Department of Public Health was in fact delivered and signed for on February 23rd, which is 2 days after I mailed it. And the letter that I mailed is in the record. It's in the file, and I did take a screenshot of that tracking software and sent it to staff, and I think they looked at it. I just did it this afternoon, and so we have proof that it got delivered. The letter got delivered. Yeah, the electronic notice form didn't go out, but so I would say the Department of Public Health and both Connecticut Water, but they have been given actual notice and know that this is going on. I wouldn't be surprised if there are members of the community who actually talk to the Department of Public Health along the way. I don't remember exactly anyone stating that, but I sort of have a vague notion that someone who had spoken about the project had actually reached out to them. But in any event, I know for a fact that they know about it because I've been attempting, at least in good faith, to reach out to the Department of Public Health. There is a person who contacted staff a week and a half ago or something like that, and there was communications back and forth. Staff was kind enough to share those emails with me, and I suspect that staff at Department of Public Health are very busy, but and I offered a meeting, a conference call. Do you have the information that you might need? And I was aware of the conversation between staff and this individual at DPH, where apparently they had done or involved in a review of information that had been provided either through staff or on their own means of gathering this information, and that a letter was being circulated in the department. But like any state agency, you know, it takes 5 or 6 or 7 people to check off that they've seen the letter. So they were hopeful that that letter would be available for a meeting that we had last Friday with a Zoom meeting with Jessica Baldwin and the staff council and a number of other staff people at Connecticut Water. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes because it was a very productive meeting. But I didn't get a response until today, which was the letter is waiting to be signed, I think. And I think they made a request, but, you know, obviously that'll be up to you to determine whether, and it has to do with, you know, this matter. We think we're ready to close. You may think that too. That's up to you, obviously, based upon the information that you have at this point and the sort of, I'll call it a blurry line. Maybe that's not the correct term between jurisdiction over the aquifer and, you know. So, you know, certainly I advised DPH that irrespective of what happened here, certainly groundwater protection was certainly within the jurisdiction of the Planning and Zoning Commission, which we haven't gone to yet, and the Aquifer Protection Agency, which is in fact, as you know, the Planning and Zoning Commission. So they have a dual jurisdictional, and so that, you know, certainly that's where probably they should spend their effort. But, you know, I'm not going to tell anybody how to spend their time or their efforts. But so we have evidence, in my view, that Department of Public Health has actual notice of this, and it's not a jurisdictional thing.
With that being said, I don't want to interrupt. So just for the agents, according to our regulations, Section 10, consideration for decisions 10.1, states that non-receipt of comments from state agencies and commissions listed in subsection 10.1 and see above within the prescribed time shall neither delay nor prejudice our decision of the agency. So we can move forward without it. It's up to us. But we don't have to hold up and wait.
Thank you.
So, and they are listed. If you go back to 10.1, you'll see there's quite a few agencies listed. So
Right.
Just so.
Which is not to say they may not have comments, you know, I'm not just, but thank you for stating that for the record. So I think I've gone through that sufficiently. As I said, we did on last Friday, whatever date that was. Yeah. We did have a nice conversation with staff including a legal counsel. And it was probably the third such conversation that we've had between the development team or portions of the development team and portions of staff at CWC. As you're aware, there's a letter from them. I think the last letter is dated April 2nd, I believe, in which they reiterate, I think, 4 concerns, one of which was the possible redirection of the stormwater away from the aquifer, which, you know, we changed our plans to accommodate that.
Did you get the one dated April 12th?
Yeah, yes, they have it. The people who would want to read it to have it. Yes, we have it.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other issue, I think one of the main issues was they asked us to place an impervious barrier under the fields so that there'd be no leaching of water from the fields through the material, that the substrate and all of that under the fields, and then, you know, possibly into the aquifer. And we have agreed to accommodate that request, and that's, I'm sure we talked about that last time. You know, we're going to do that. So the fields will be essentially 100% impermeable, and all that water is going to be directed. Anything that falls from the sky, which, as you know, has PFAS in it, that rainwater, is going to go into our drainage system and join the drainage system that the State Department of Transportation uses for Route 91. All right, so the other 2 requests we discussed on Friday, one of which was they asked us to test the actual, they wanted a sample, and what I told, you know, so we have a test, which we explained to you last month, and it's in the record, of PFAS, and as Mr. Hubbard, Alan Hubbard, the American or Athletic Fields of America expressed to you, they have over a period of the last 4 years eliminated PFAS in all their manufacturing processes, which was no easy task because, I mean, I guarantee you, probably all of us have PFAS on our clothes somewhere, and and it falls, like I said, it falls from the sky. And we had a test done, and it showed either non-detect or zero at parts per million, all right, which is a fairly significant standard. A couple of days ago, though, or middle of last week, the Environmental Protection Agency of the United States government finally adopted their regulations as it relates to PFAS in drinking water supplies. And they have adopted a 4 parts per trillion standard, all right? And they've given water companies, if Ms. Baldwin wants to talk about this, that would be up to her, but I think they've given water companies 5 years to comply. That's a heavy burden, I think, on the water companies, because we know from last time that Connecticut Water Company, and I think I provided this information to you, of their tests in the Great Western section of their facilities, which includes the 5 wells on the property adjacent to us, the spring wells, I think they're called. They do have PFAS levels that are higher than 4 parts per trillion. So obviously they've got some work to do ahead of them, and I understand why they don't want to see any more added to the system. That's certainly reasonable, but we don't control the material. That belongs to TENCADI, and I can't agree to send something over to them that I don't have, because that's a decision they have to make. So we're trying to go through channels. What we did agree on is that if we were to do the test, one of the things we're also concerned about is the chain of custody. All right, because if you put it in a plastic bag, it's going to catch whatever the PFAS that's in the plastic bag. And at 4 parts per trillion, anything can set this off. All right. So the testing, there are probably only a couple of labs in the entire country that have the technology to drill down to parts per trillion. That's a really, you're really getting down there. Even for like aerospace engineers, they don't even talk about that tolerances like that, and they're like very particular. But so we're working through the process of getting TENCADI, and we agree, I'm sorry if I said this, they agree that we could test ourselves and they'd accept our test. So we're working through the process with TENCADI to ask them if they'll do some testing. I think we're probably going to end up where they're going to do the testing and give us that information, but it's not going to be tonight. And even if we continue to May, it's not going to be before then. I mean, this is a specialized test that takes a long time to so I guess the question is, if anyone's waiting for this process to close until we get the results of that test, we're going to run out of time. And, I don't know what else to say to you on that. We think we can get it done, but I can't guarantee it, and, we'd like to see this thing close. So if we're waiting for that, and again, that's an issue that's going to be, if we decide, if TENCADI, not we, decides to do the testing and we get it, PZC, we'll get that information. Mm-hmm. The other thing was that we've been asked to do is to provide a spigot or some other means of drawing water from the stormwater collection system near a point where it, just before it enters and mixes with the water that's, from the state of Connecticut, somehow so they can tap into it and do sampling of the stormwater discharge. All right. And we said, well, first of all, they agreed that they would do that. They want us to give them permission to come on the property, take water, and then test it. I don't know. I mean, George can go into this if you want, but, that's not potable water, and it's tested to different standards and different applications than drinking water is. So we're trying to take a drinking water sample and test it like that when it's not a drinking. So, there's all kinds of issues with that. But in any event, we're still discussing that. The other issue, frankly, is something we're not going to agree to, and I want to, just so you have, because the letter's there, and they want us to agree to hold them harmless if they test our water and it comes out higher than 4 parts per trillion. And I can't, in good conscience, agree, we're not going to agree to that. I'm sorry. So if you're waiting for us to do that, it's not going to happen. I can't imagine any private, even a public entity, agreeing to do that, because the watershed and the aquifer are fairly large, and again, this stuff falls out of the sky. I don't, So, but in any event, I understand why they want it, but that could remain an outstanding issue. And so we've asked them to give us a little bit more specificity as to what they're looking for. And it's only been since Friday, so we're expecting to get that, but I don't know when, and maybe Ms. Baldwin can speak to that. But it was a very productive meeting. So that's kind of where we left it. All right. So the other thing I want to talk about briefly is feasible and prudent alternatives, which is obviously something you're near and dear to you. All right. And I want to put this in some context, because all these things require you to make sort of a socioeconomic balancing analysis, right? Because feasible, yeah, I can get anything I want engineered to anything whether it's prudent or not is a different story. And the prudent is where you do this balancing of the needs of the environment versus the economic realities that we face, right? So, in the context is something you all know much better than I do. So when the project first came to town, I think that the developer was very clear about the economics of the project, right? That they've built these in other places. They know how many basketball courts they need. They know how many soccer fields they need. And it's all driven by people coming, right? And to get a fairly significant, travel teams coming, AAU teams, or whatever it happens to be. Of course, and that, fills up the hotel and gets the retail working, and, it's all a symbiotic kind of thing. So, and frankly, the statutes do require sort of an economic analysis as part of this, right? So that's great, because if they just said feasible, then probably nothing would ever get approved, because being feasible and getting it done are totally different things. So when the project was introduced early on, one of the ways that would probably have been the most prudent and feasible would be to have fields on Brainerd Park, right? Outside of the wetlands, outside of the aquifer. But you know better than I do what would happen there, and it was something the town decided that they would not try to make happen, and I understand that, the realities of the situation. So now we've got 11 fields on our property, and 4 or 5, someone can tell me if I'm wrong, are within a regulated area. Okay? 4 of them? 4. Okay, 4 of the 11. I'll say this once and I won't say it again. The project doesn't work with 7 fields. So there's the economic reality that we're facing. So let's talk about the rest of the standards. So so what we decided to do, because, there's plenty of acreage to put 11 fields, and we decided to put them in places where, or other things there were already parking lots there, right? They've already been disturbed, some of the fields. We looked at the wetlands, and George has gone through this. Wetlands A, which is about 2.5 acres or so, and then Wetlands B, and you went out there for the walk, with the difference between the two, and that the water from those parking lots has been going into Wetlands A for decades. Untreated water, by the way. There were no filter. It was just a direct pipe right out there. So, and then George has given you, I think, a great background in the quality, right? We're talking, every wetlands is not the same, and the quality of Wetlands A is not even close to Wetlands B. And I think Connecticut Water Company would agree. I think they actually did with us, and I'm not stepping out of turn here, that, they weren't that concerned with Wetlands A, because it is what it is, all right? And so, in any other circumstance, asking to fill 2.5 acres of wetlands, your hair would be on end, and mine would be too, because it's something you don't, routinely do. But given the analysis and the mitigation that George is going to talk about more in a few minutes, we found it as the most prudent place, if you will, to place some of these fields. Now, along the way, thanks in part, of course, to Connecticut Water Company, and they're working with us in the process, this project is about as prudent as it's going to get, in the sense that, yeah, we've moved all the water away from the aquifer, all right? It's now, the surface is now impermeable, and so, you know, now, there is, I'm not telling anything that you probably don't, when the water leaves our property, it's going to travel across 30 feet of aquifer before the aquifer ends, at least the mapping that we have, that we're using, which coincidentally, and maybe conveniently so, seems to end right at the state right away. So it's, you know, it's good that the aquifer ends exactly there, but, you know, fine, that's the mapping we have to deal with, right? So, yeah, it's going to cross the aquifer for, you know, 65 feet, 30 of it on our property and 30 of it off-site. So I don't know, you know, and there's some riprap down there, you know, there's channels down there, and, you know, because it's the I don't know, when was the highway put in, the 50s? 60? That's such a highway, somewhere in there, right? Yeah, before you, that was Eisenhower's big thing, right? Put highways everywhere across this country. And so the water's been going there, and I suspect, and I'm not an engineer, that it's pretty well packed out where the water's been going off the highway. So I don't know what the infiltration is going to be of the water coming off into the aquifer from that little stretch of channelized. You know, you judge that for yourself. You're in charge of finding the facts. I think the project is much better than it was 8 weeks ago. There's no question about that. And I think, given all, in the context and all of it, that this is the most feasible and prudent plan that makes sense for us, and I think, hopefully you'll agree, makes sense under the standards that you have to decide these on. The other thing is, the other context, of course, is that this is not virgin land. This is a building that housed first the Phoenix Insurance Company and then Mass Mutual, right, with associated parking, the garage, and they've been before you on 2 or 3 occasions going back to the 80s. And we're improving the conditions out there. It's going to be better than exists now. There's no question about that. You know, George is an expert in this, and he's testified, and no one said, oh, you're making it worse, because we're not. We're making it better than it was. So in that context, the other thing is, the other realistic thing, and I'm going to anecdotally talk about this for a second because my wife's in the insurance business, and look around about the insurance industry in the last 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, and especially since COVID, all right? The Hartford built 450,000 square feet of office space in Windsor on Griffin Road not that long ago. It's probably 20 years. It's empty. The building's been abandoned by the Hartford Insurance Group, all right? This building has been abandoned by Mass Mutual. If you've been through Simsbury on Route 10 and 202 lately, the Hartford had a huge campus there. That's where their annuity business was. You know what's there now? Apartments that go for $3,000 a month. The campus is gone. It's been obliterated. The insurance business is, the idea of suburbanizing and having these suburban campuses is no longer part of their think tank there. You know, they're centralized, and they're being begged, and I can tell you this truthfully, they got begged to go back to work in Hartford because too many people during COVID got used to the idea of staying home. Well, the mayor of Hartford said, whoa, where's everyone buying lunch? Who's going to our restaurants? Who's going to the... So now the insurance companies in Hartford are making their people go back, you know, so they can spend money in Hartford. That's my cynical view, but, you know, I get it. But so this is not ever going to be an insurance building. It's never going to be an office building again. You know that market. So this is an adaptive reuse property. And the only one who's ever going to come here is an adaptive reuse. And that's what our project is, an adaptive reuse. If it's not us, it's going to be somebody else, maybe, at some point. But, I mean, that's just the reality. We're mixing, work, retail, hotel, right, and play. Somebody might come in and say, oh, we want to use it for something else. I don't know. But right now, it's been vacant for a very long time, and there haven't been a lot of takers, probably even not a lot of seekers. So I think with all of that in the context and the fact that with the assistance of Connecticut Water Company, we've made a better project out of this than we came in with a few weeks ago. And I think, given all of the circumstances, I think you can make a finding that we've arrived at a project which meets the required analysis you have to do under the feasible and prudent requirements. So unless you have any questions, I know you don't want to hear me talk anymore. You want George? You're waiting
I
for
like George
George.
to come up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. You ready, George? Here he comes.
Thank you, though.
Yes, thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone.
Hi.
I will try to be short. Famous last words.
Well, hope not. Could you go over the mitigations?
I can go through the mitigation. That's the idea. Bob, before I do that, I want to reiterate some of the things that were said here from my particular perspective regarding the improvement of water quality in general on the site, and that's a fact. What has been happening there, so as John has told you, there are several acres, I forget how many, and several of those acres were parking lots that have been basically taken out of. And that situation was interesting because the parking lots were basically discharging without any primary treatment system or even secondary system. If you've seen it, we found the catch basin. Remember, I couldn't remember where the catch basin was. It was buried, but that's basically it as far as that part of the parking lot and water quality. Now, to digress a little bit on PFAS. As I told you the last time, what we've found out that, there's a cumulative accumulation of PFAS on soils, because that's been happening for many, many years. And I talked about the Massachusetts study, which found orders and orders of magnitude higher PFAS levels than what we'd like to see. Currently, there is no PFAS standards for stream water. So for drinking water, there is, but not for stream water or for wetlands. And likely, there's a tremendous amount of PFAS that's glommed, if you will, or absorbed to the soils of wetland A, for instance, and probably other soils of wetland B also. And in particular, wetland A, even though most of the PFAS is probably right there, there's also some leaching potential that's happening. And so I would expect that some of that PFAS, maybe a fraction, but again, a fraction is the problem, is getting down into the aquifer from wetland A. So what and I don't think that Carl said about this, but one of the things that we were going to do is to take the topsoil, which we expect is what it has most of the PFAS in wetland A, test it, and that's going to be removed from the site. So out of the APA. In addition, before we put the layman down, or any virgin soil that we bring in for fill, what's underneath there is also going to be tested not by me, but by an LEP. Okay, so mitigation. So what I've tried to do in this report of April 9th, and I will hopefully ask you, I can actually do that? There you go. Of course, I can't see anything. Is this my report? Okay.
Yeah, that's a good time.
All right. Was my report? Is my report. All right. So what I want to do is I like pictures. I'm sorry. I like pictures. So you've seen that from the last time, but I included everything that I gave you last time also in this report, so that's one package. And what this tells you is that when I went back in March, I believe, end of March, and looked at these areas, this was the area that I found of a proposed vernal pool, and we'll talk about that in a moment, and then the dumping and eroded slopes of this headwater stream that's receiving unmitigated water from Brainerd Park. But let's see. Okay, we talked about this being the dredging of the forebay for the pond freshwater pond, but I want to eventually get here. So before I get there,
Where's the pond? So, how does that work now? Because currently some Connecticut's doing it or something.
Yeah, so it's required by DEEP every 5 years that we dredge a pond.
You get notices on it.
Yep, and they have to come back for approval, and I believe it costs the town about $350,000. The applicant is willing to help with those funds up to $250,000 should the agency accept it.
okay, so put that to the side. I won't have to talk about it. We talked about the beaver dam removal. We decided that the upper beaver dam has been there for 15, 20 years. It's robust. We don't want to touch it because, first of all, we're going to lose the open water habitat that seems to be stable. And obviously that's used by amphibians. And also there's a small infestation of common reed. So if we release it, we're going to get it to the rest of the wetland, potentially. So I don't want to see that happening. Another one is the conservation easement. I think there was a map that was provided. We have it somewhere if you need to look at it. And the conservation easement is going to take 15.7 acres of the subject property and place them into conservation, basically restricting any further development. Now, this will include wetland B, except for those minor encroachments that we talked about, 2,000 some square feet. And Waterworks Brook, the semi-perennial tributary that's coming off of Brainerd Park, and also the step wetlands. So that's, once we're done, the step wetlands will be part of, within the conservation easement. And at some point, maybe at planning and zoning or something like that, usually they come up with a legal document, and that's not, this is this guy's purview. You want to talk about that?
Yes, again, for the record, Carl Andolina. So I've worked with the town attorney's office in the past, and actually I think we've used, I think in this town, typically that's a condition put on a permit where the applicant will provide a conservation easement in form satisfactory to the town attorney, and we'll work on that together.
Okay, so that takes care of that. Now, the next thing that I want to do is to talk about item 1.4 of my report, which we'll pass this. So this includes two areas. One is on the property, and one is on Brainerd Park. And in both cases, we've seen one when we were on our sidewalk, and that's that severe gully and eroded area that I've actually seen progressing since November. And so that is an area that I show here. And, okay, is there a plus sign for me to get a bigger? Here we go. Is this it? No. In the middle. There we go. Jeez. I think I'm getting to cataract surgery soon. All right, so this is the area of severe brook erosion, and the reason I put the latitude and longitude is because that's what I put on my GPS so that I could find it. And then it was quite obvious once you looked at the at this mapping with the 2016 1-foot contour that the state has provided for us. One of the questions that was asked, so here's it. So there's the typical way that this is done is when the time comes to do it, because obviously this is kind of evolving, unfortunately. There's standard bioengineering methods, which means, let me explain what these bioengineering methods are. Some of them could be hard, so like riprap, like modified riprap, but more often than not, what we try to use is to use coir logs. You familiar with those? Those are coconut fiber logs that are biodegradable over time, and they can be various dimensions and lengths. And usually what we do is those are staked down in the areas that we want to stabilize. Sometimes we will use erosion control blankets of certain sorts that are also biodegradable and made by coconut fiber. But those are staked, and also you can include plantings within them. So you can use, this is used mostly on the off season. You can get a willow stakes that are dormant, and you basically can put them into the core mats or nearby, and when the season comes, they will grow. And obviously, willows basically spread their. Now, if you can't do it in the off season, and you do it during the growing season, then you have little propagules, what we call tubelings. They're little tubelings about this much, and you can basically put them into the core logs or other areas, and those will also grow. You have willows, you can have, so in the shady situation, you're probably going to have like gray dogwood, something like that is semi-shade tolerant. So there are two areas. This is one of them. And one of the questions that was asked of me by Georgie is she says, well, there might be other areas up or down from here that need attention. And so what the notes say is that at the time, I can't even read this. Okay, this is the area of the most severe bank erosion, but additional downstream bank erosion, I think that's where I've seen most of it, will be evaluated and possibly included for restoration at the time of implementation. So I will be on the hook, or someone like me be on the hook at the time when that's be ready to be done, to investigate the brook to see if maybe other areas are now as important. Because as I said, this is a dynamic, evolving system, and until we get there, we won't know exactly. We know this one is going to be certainly one that we're going to have to. And one of the things that I said here is that at least 60 shrubs shall be planted, because here's the situation. What this has done, as you remember, is not only compromise the stream, but it's also compromised the wetland. So it's taken part of the wetland. So when we bring it back to equilibrium, which is what the bioengineering would do, then we have an opportunity to plant. And so I'm saying a minimum, at least 60 shrubs shall be planted there. And it's going to be the same palette of shrubs that I have in the plan for the step wetlands, and I'll go into that in a moment. All right, so that's area number one for stream stabilization, wetland enhancement. The second one is this. And we expanded that as we discussed it with Georgie. Initially, I was just worried about this section, the upper, say, half or so, which you've seen the photographs is pretty bad. Not just the dumping, but also the erosion. But it occurs to me that that situation, until it reaches sort of an equilibrium, comes around, that this has been compromised a little bit. So there's a steep bank here, and then it goes all the way to the other feeder stream. So we're saying that this is going to be the entire area. They're going to do stabilization, removal of debris. Obviously, it's only the upper portion. And then also here, native shrubs will be planted plus or minus 60. All right, so that's that. Then my favorite, the vernal pool. Again, I don't know why I'm so excited about this one, but I am. And by the way, the total count for my little pool that I created ended up being 30 plus wood frog egg masses and 17 salamander egg masses. So I have a tier 1 vernal pool in my backyard. Any rate, plus the great tree frogs just appeared today, so they're starting to be heard. So there's a sequence here, and there's also a sequence in the report of how we would do that. Obviously, one of the important things is how are we going to get there? And we have to do this prior for us doing anything on or within our property, because if we don't, then we lose access. And this is the only reasonable access is from our property. So you can see I kind of follow the contours, and I did walk part of that. And basically I'm saying whatever removal is about 200 square feet of excavated area. I'm thinking is about 11 cubic yards that's going to be spread in an area that's right here, this what we call the spoils area, again, a few inches spread out over a larger portion. There is no significant trees there. There's a few saplings, a couple of shrubs, but we're going to replant that area anyhow. And then we're saying that 20 shrubs and 3 trees will be planted in the perimeter of this. And this, as you see from the photographs, kind of open. Right now, there's not much there. And again, a seed mix will be placed on this shade-tolerant seed mix. And this is the path, and I'm also saying that, this purple line, pink line is, instead of using, we're going to use the core logs, the bigger ones, the 15-inch ones, which typically have, shredded mulch in them or compost. I like compost better. Once they get the first rain, they're going nowhere. You don't even have to stake them down. And I think that's obviously necessary if you're going to be doing any work here. I might put a double one on the outlet here. So there's more information about how to do that, and I'm sure that this will be closely monitored by staff when it's done, which is fine with us. Now, the wetland and upland restoration and enhancement. This, I don't know if I have a map for that one. Do I have a map for that one? Let's see. Go back here. Georgie, which one is the map? This the top one or the second one? All the way at the end? Thank you very much. You put me in the end again. Is this?
No, go back to.
Okay, so that's the notes. Okay, here we go. But this is the step wetland, but what I want to talk about is something that you also see here. And what we've committed to, and I think this is about half of it, I guess. This area that you see, which is both within the wetlands and uplands, is the removal of invasive species because you have a proliferation there. But it's also important because not only because there's one there, but because it's next to the step wetland. So it makes sense because that expands the restoration and enhancement when you're also creating a wetland. So you have all three elements going on there. There are specific instructions on what happens. Now, one of the things I know that a lot of people are, we're saying here the removal is going to be undertaken under proper supervision, obviously, by mechanical means of pulling and cutting. That's phase one. When it comes to Japanese barberry, as I've told you, not much comes back once it's pulled. And I've seen that, and even in my own property. Multiflora rose, not so much. Morus honeysuckle, not so much. So usually after you mechanically remove them, and how do you remove them? You're not going to yank the whole thing out because you're going to disturb too much soil. So if it's something big, you can basically cutting it near the surface of the surface and taking the mass out, or using a weed wench, and the smaller stuff you can. But some of it is probably going to pop back. And probably multiflora rose, Morus honeysuckle, and so the question then becomes, do we use herbicides? Now it's in the APA. We probably don't want to use herbicides. Now, my view is that you can if you use them judiciously, because it's basically spot treatment. So if you have a little sprout that comes out, usually what we do, and I don't have a license to do that except on my own property, but what I've directed people to do is we use a funnel which is adjustable, that's made of polyethylene actually, without PFAS hopefully. And what we do is we can put it over the little sprout, depending on, and then you spray in it. So there's no spray out around it. So it's very, very targeted. And it's about a foot high, and it has a way to collapse, and you basically put it on and spray it, and that's it. And what we found out is we don't like glyphosate, we like triclopyr, because glyphosate spreads out into the soil, and triclopyr doesn't as much. If you use the right amount, it goes nowhere. It just kills that spot, and 2.5 to 3 weeks later, it's denatured, because that is its half-life. All right, so a total of 1.5 acres are targeted, which is, and this one is roughly 0.83 acres. So there's other areas. We know this area, and I know of other areas, but at the time of implementation, we're going to have to take a look and see, okay, has anything changed, and where's the bigger bang for the buck now and so it's obviously going to be only within the property. And then we're going to be interplanting with at least 225 shrubs and trees here, for a total of at least 440 on that 1.5 acre. That's a lot. And the tables are in the back of this plan. Let's go here. Oops, there we go. Okay, they're so small. Why did you make them so small, John? Just,
You can read them.
okay. All right, so, okay. So what I've done here, I can barely see it, but that's all right. You can look at the report. What I've done is I have two columns. The one column is the wetland creation, that's the step wetland. And the other one is what we're talking about here, the wetland enhancement and restoration. And so if you tally it all, you'll see that 90 plus 60 plus 290 is 440. And then, of course, we have other things here as far as plantings are concerned. Now, the step wetlands, where are those? Next plan down?
The step wetlands, you were just there, back in the upper left corner.
Upper left corner.
Yep. Maybe smaller.
Ah, there we go. So here they are. And again, what's happening here, as you've probably known, is 3 wetland cells. And we have a portion of the roof water is coming to the first cell, overflowing to the second, overflowing to the third, and then down to the wetland. And so we have, I'm trying to remember what our total is. We have 11,000 square feet or 0.25 acres of wetland creation. Could be more depending on, what spillover there is from having additional water in this area and the surrounding uplands. So you might end up with a little more, but we have at a minimum that. And of course, you can look at the report, and I won't go into it right now, but I have, I think, 8 pages of very detailed notes of how to do this step by step, including something that you might be familiar with. So when we get there, we're going to have to make a determination, because for the creation, it's relying on water sitting there for a little bit, so a few inches of water as it cascades down. If we determine at the time of implementation that the soils are a little too more permeable, I don't expect that based on what I see around it, but there are patches of sand that I've seen in this hillside, which is kind of surprising, because that's the way that the glacial waters left it, I guess. So if that's the case, then we'll do the same thing that we did in 29 Moody Street, which is to create a liner. And so I have those just in case. I don't think that's going to be the case, but just in case. Again, supervision by someone like myself through every single stage and phase of the wetland creation, multi-year monitoring, and things like protection from herbivory, weed control, invasive plant control that's going to go on, obviously. So what we do is we have year 1 is the implementation. That doesn't count for monitoring, because we're going to be doing monitoring during the installation. The next 3 years are the ones where we come in and see if any adjustments have to be made. We have too many weeds, even native, which we don't want because we want to promote the biodiversity of other things. So again, 3 next growing season is when the monitoring is going to happen. And of course, brief reports each year, but November 30th of monitoring year to commission via staff. I think that's it, and I've probably gone through it a little too fast, but if you have any particular questions on the mitigation strategies, this is the time to ask the questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for him? Go ahead.
For the filling and capping of Wetlands A, what's the fill that's going to be going in there?
That's a John Furman question, I think. So, John, you want to answer that question?
And I'm just going to add on to that, the topsoil that's removed, where's that going to go? The contaminated topsoil?
Good evening, John Furman, Office Manager for VHB. So I wasn't paying attention to the question, so the first one?
Wetlands A is going to be filled and capped. What's the fill that's going to go in there?
Yeah, so as I believe Carl had mentioned, we're going to basically strip all the organics out of there until we get to what we think is kind of like the parent material. Then we're going to test that and see what we end up with. I've described the site before where we picked a grade in the middle of the soccer fields, which is even with the building. And all the fields are dead level. So it's about 50-50. So we're cutting as we get close to Brainerd Road, and then we're going to fill as we get to the other half of the site. So our intention is the material that's already there, we're going to pulverize the pavement, and then we're going to create the parking area behind the building, and then the material that we pulverize, we're going to use as the base under the paving. We're going to have excess that's just going to become the property of the contractor, and they're going to remove it from the site. So what will be left is the same parent material below the gravel base of the thing as we have on the rest of the site. So if that material is kind of unique, if it can be kept dry and dried out, it compacts very tight. If it stays moist, it's slimy is a non-technical term. So we may bring in, we have a geotechnical engineer on board. He may bring in a more granular material, like a sand or a very minor gravel. And we're going to use that parking area I described as kind of a staging area. So we'll bring that material over, we'll mix it with material to make it more compatible for compacting, and then bring it into this area and place it. So our intention is to use the material that we have on site, which has always been there, improve it so that, because we're moving it, we're taking out of its natural habitat. Yeah. So natural state, let's do it that way. Making it better and then putting it back in. But the material that we bring in to mix with it will be whatever the geotechnical engineer recommends. It could be a sand, it could be a minor gravel. Anything we bring into the site, a requirement of our specifications that the contractor has to provide us with a certification that's been tested and it has 0 contaminants in it.
And I think the question was, what are we doing with the topsoil from Wetland A?
That was the second question?
That's going away.
Yeah. So again, that becomes the property of the contractor. So the way that all contracts usually are is any surplus material becomes the property of the contractor. So we're going to test that beforehand, and we may have some, volatile organics or something in that soil from the years of accepting discharge from the parking area. If it becomes regulated, then an LEP needs to get involved. They need to classify it. They need to get a disposal waste site, and then it basically is regulated through a chain of custody from when it leaves the site to when it hits the disposal site. The best case scenario is that it doesn't have anything in it, and it really is just topsoil. We'll determine that through testing, and then again, it still becomes the contractor's responsibility. He removes it to his yard, and then he does it, or uses it wherever he has to. What's unique about this site is that we have very little need for topsoil on the site. We, normally like you build a building or a parking lot, you're taking topsoil, you're kind of dressing it in. We don't have any of that. We don't really need any. So what we have on site is more than what we need. So most of it is going to be left, taken away.
Anybody else?
Yeah. I have a quick question. You said closely monitored by staff when done, and you talked about the 3 growing seasons and monitoring that. Does that ever go away? Maybe it's a question for staff, maybe it's a question, but the monitoring of all of these mitigations that you're proposing, following up, how many years does that go for? Or is it just going to become overgrown, and how does that work?
So that's a good question. So, and this is kind of follows sort of the guidance that Army Corps of Engineers, Connecticut DEP has put out there. And basically the 3 years is in order to get to a place where you can say success, right? So you have 95% stabilization, you don't have any invasives, you've gotten rid of issues like herbivory by deer and things like that, have you dealt with it? And there's a few little tricks that you can see in there of what we do by using things like milligranite, which is a deterrent for deer. And I can, this is PG, so I can't tell you exactly why that happens. But someday well, anyhow, it comes from the sewage systems of Milwaukee. They take after everything's clarified and there's no, and they basically make an amazing fertilizer, which milligranite, which remains some of the smell of human, you know what? So the deer sense that, and yeah, I know it's interesting. It's better than coyote urine, I guess. So there's goals that we have to meet to say this is successful, and usually the 3 years do it. Now, you'll also see there that we can go to 4th year. So if the wetland scientist says the 3rd year we haven't met the stated goals, we'll extend it another year. And if that doesn't meet the stated goals, then it goes another year. Hopefully that's not going to go in perpetuity, but at some point we say, okay, this is good enough. We've done what we need to do for nature to continue what it does, which we all know there's always evolution of habitats anyhow. So that's natural.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
George, so in your notes, after your plant list, I love the plant list, it's great. It says July planting will need watering through the end of July, and of course at the bottom it says watering and weed is need during the first growing season. Where does the water come from? How do you water into the new wetland areas we're going to create? How's that going to happen?
All right, so, correct. I think what the notes say is that if you have a drought, which we've experienced here in Connecticut a few years back, as you recall, several times, then we need to water. Now, especially if we don't have inputs from rain from the roof, that's going to be wet, this thing. So typically before we plant, we water like crazy, and then we bring the plants nice and moist and install them. I would say that that's something that would require a water truck and a big pipe. And I've seen that happen before, and we bring non-chlorinated water, obviously, from several sources, and we basically, someone comes down and starts watering. Okay. And we do that until we're back into not drought season.
Thank you.
Yep. You're welcome.
How was your eclipse trip?
Oh.
How was your eclipse trip? You were raving about the eclipse last meeting.
Unfortunately, my wife got skittish because my brother-in-law told her that the Vermont had called out the National Guard, and so she decided that we were not going to go out and mess with all these people. So guess where we saw the eclipse? Enfield. 40 Powder Hill Road. 14.
Thank you very much. We'll have.
Plus, he had homework to do.
That's right. He had homework to do. So it's good he stayed home. So now we're going to have if anybody from the audience, we have a couple of people to speak.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you. While they're doing that, we did receive the correspondence from Mr. Furman to John Cabibbo regarding their comments, and it was at our desk today. And then we did receive one from Diane Pizzo? Okay, President of the Enfield Garden Club, dated April 15th. I could read it into the record. It's to the Enfield Inland Wetlands and Watercourse Agency, statement from the Enfield Garden Club regarding the All Sports Village Complex application. My name is Diane Pizzo, and I'm a resident of Enfield. I serve as the president of the Enfield Garden Club. The mission of the Enfield Garden Club is to stimulate the knowledge and love of gardening, to aid in the protection of the environment, and to promote civil beautification. I am addressing the All Sports Village Complex application. As a civic organization, we are concerned with the protection of our environment. The Enfield Garden Club is worried that the development of the soccer fields will have lasting negative environmental effects on the wetlands and water supply for Enfield. Protecting our wetlands and water supply is of the highest importance for the public health of our community, the land, and the area wildlife. We are concerned artificial turf fields will expose players to forever chemicals, PFAS, that will result in health issues. We are concerned that PFAS will seep into the environment, causing permanent damage to anything downstream. As the artificial turf breaks down into the smaller nanoplastic particles, the forever chemicals will disperse into our waterways, soil, and even the bodies of fish, mammals, and humans. The EPA has stated that no amount of PFAS is safe. To compound the problem, there are no safe options for recycling artificial turf. Therefore, we urge careful consideration of implementing organic turf fields for the All Sports Village Soccer Complex. Organic turf offers a safer alternative that prioritizes public health, environmental substitutability, and the well-being of our community and its natural habitats. Thank you for your attention to these critical concerns. Respectfully submitted, Diane Pizzo, President of the Enfield Garden Club. So with that being said, we now have some signups, Jessica Baldwin and Rose. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, that.
That one. Hi.
Thank you for having us tonight. So I'm Jessica Baldwin. I'm the Environmental and Regulatory Compliance Coordinator with the Connecticut Water Company. The project's on top of our aquifer, and we're also in a butter. So.
Good evening. My name is Rose Gavrilovic. I am the Vice President of Service Delivery, work closely with Jessica on the protection of our water supply.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we did provide a letter to you dated April 12th, so I understand that's all in your packet, so I'm obviously not going to read through the letter. But I do want to bring up some important points of that letter, and I want to start with pointing out to something that you would already know is that the town IWWA regulations state that the IWWA shall take into consideration all relevant facts and circumstances and will consider feasible and prudent alternatives, which was discussed by the applicant. Also, will consider a design that will prevent or minimize pollution or other environmental damage. Will consider whether the activity will injure or interfere with public health, and whether the activity would cause impacts outside the development area to wetlands or water courses. So the purview, in our opinion, is that the protection of the drinking water supply does lie with the Inland Wetlands Agency, which is in the town regulations. We also stated in our letter we wanted to correct some misinformation that was presented by the applicant at the last public hearing and also today even. For example, the PFAS in our Spring Lots well field is below the the EPA's new maximum contamination level of 4 parts per trillion. So that is not true. Also, the applicant's statement that PFAS have been detected at 8 to 10 parts per trillion in our northern western system, which is our large regional system, is also incorrect and not true. So there's some other information in the letter that corrects some of that misinformation. Third, I just wanted to summarize some of the outstanding items that are important to be resolved before this project would move forward. And to summarize those, the first is that we need some confirmation that the materials in the turf, all the materials in the synthetic turf product are PFAS free, as was stated originally when this application came forward, but it needs to be below the 2 parts per billion, which was originally stated, and it needs to be at least below the 4 parts per trillion new EPA maximum contamination level. Reminder, 2 parts per billion is the same as 2,000 parts per trillion. So 4 parts per trillion, 2 parts per billion won't get us there. It really needs to be to 4 parts per trillion. But like was stated in the other testimony, no PFAS is safe levels. But going with the maximum contamination level of the EPA, we need that confirmation that the product will not be above 4 parts per trillion. The second outstanding item is that we are requesting pre and post stormwater quality monitoring. And the Connecticut Water Company has had productive conversations with the applicant, and we can provide what that pre and post water quality monitoring would look like to the applicant. We will need a little bit of time to put that together, obviously, and we would like the time to continue negotiations, or actually just working with the applicant, as we have had 2 productive meetings so far, to come up with what that plan would look like. So that's another major item that we wanted to discuss. So there are some outstanding items. The applicant did, like they said, they did make an impervious layer. They are moving the stormwater to a single discharge point. I just want to remind everyone that discharge point still discharges within the boundaries of the aquifer protection area. And I assure you, the boundary of the aquifer protection area is based on hydrologic models. It's not based on a state right-of-way. So that outfall of the stormwater, if it contained PFAS, could be drawn back into the system and put into the drinking water. So that's why we're so adamant on having pre and post stormwater quality sampling, so we can assure that no PFAS generated from the site are going to end up back into our aquifer. There were some other items in there, but I think those were the most significant, outstanding items that I wanted to bring to your attention. I wanted to invite Rose to have, if she had any more comments.
Sure. I think Rose Gavrilovic, Vice President of Service Delivery at Connecticut Water. I would just like to summarize, the way this project has gone. We have no opposition to this development, and we appreciate all of the modifications and the work that the developer has done to address our concerns. We have continued to meet with them and would like to continue to meet with them to resolve all of the issues. With the EPA's regulations that have just been finalized, and these are regulations that we've been expecting for quite a while. They were in draft form. These place a heavy burden on water utilities and ultimately our customers to ensure that we have water treated to 4 parts per trillion. So when we're looking at this development within our aquifer protection area, we're really looking to protect the water supply in Enfield and the service that we provide to our customers who are residents of Enfield. We have other systems where we're looking at the PFAS levels, and we're looking at treatment, and it's very, very expensive. And we want to make sure that in areas that we don't have a problem, that we can do things up front to address issues before they become a problem. So really, our request is really that the applicant request an extension so that we can continue to work on this issue and come to a resolution. They say that the best negotiations are when no one is happy, and I feel like we've made a lot of progress. We've come from opposite ends of the spectrum. We've made a lot of progress, and I do believe that if we are able to continue the discussions and we're able to work with the turf manufacturer as well, that we can come to that resolution. And as Ms. Baldwin mentioned, this is the most significant issue, and it's really just to protect the water supply of Enfield. We do understand that the DPH has taken a look at the plans also, and that I believe that we were copied on an email where they would also like an extension to be granted so that they can comment on the plans as well. our overall goal is to come to a resolution and to move the project forward for the town. So we would just like to request that the applicant consider that so that we can efficiently address the issues and move the project forward. Thank you.
I missed the part where you said someone else wants to have an extension. Who would that be?
What, the Department of
That's
Health?
the Department of Public Health. Yes.
Just, so this would also be addressed in the next step, right? Yes?
What do you mean next step?
If we were approved, the next step in the approval process of this project, P&Z, because they would handle the aquifer protection as well, so.
Right. So in my memo, I gave you a little synopsis of your jurisdiction. It doesn't necessarily correlate to the aquifer, but there is a groundwater and water quality part that's in the title. But when they apply to planning and zoning, they'll have another opportunity for comment, and they'll be notified again when they submit for planning and zoning.
Would that be planning and zoning or aquifer?
Planning and zoning is the aquifer board, so they don't have to make an application to the aquifer agency. It's non-regulated activity. That was something that was mistaken upon in the past. So when they apply to planning and zoning would address the aquifer concerns and the aquifer issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Kathleen Weiss. Sorry. Hi, could you state your name and address for the record?
Yes, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Kathleen Vose, and I'm a member of the Enfield Conservation Commission. My address is 16 Powder Hill Road. We would like to thank the application for their consideration in using an alternative synthetic turf field that does not require crumb rubber as infill. By this action, we believe the applicant understands the concerns associated with synthetic turf fields and is truly looking at alternative material. We understand that polyurethane does not contain PFAS. We also understand that PFAS are sometimes used as part of the extruding process. PFAS are not always used, but it can be used in this part of the manufacturing process, and I'm not sure that that's been addressed yet. We request the applicant to ask the manufacturer of the polyurethane grass if PFAS are used during the extruding process. We believe this is a critical item to verify, as just this week, as we know, the EPA issued guidelines for the limit of PFAS in drinking water. Design specifications for retaining walls, drainage systems, and a comprehensive description of fill and plantings on and near the tops of escarpment slopes should be completed by a qualified geotechnical engineer prior to any approval of the permit by your commission. The IWWA must review those systems to ensure the plan is complete, prudent, and feasible, and assures the project will be constructed as per any approved plans in order to protect inland wetlands and watercourse resources at the bottom of the slopes. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
Good evening, Karen LaPlante, 166 North Maple Street. I've got a statement I'm going to provide to Georgie, so you guys can all get one. I'm not going to read the whole thing, because 5 minutes isn't enough time for me to read this. So my first page basically talks about your regulations, your title, your authority, and what your purpose is. So, and some people have already, these regulations hereby provide an orderly process to balance the need for the economic growth of the state and the use of the land with the need to protect its environment and ecology in order to forever guarantee to the people of the state the safety of such natural resources for their benefit and enjoyment, and for the benefit and enjoyment of generations yet unborn. So it's not just a short-term thing here we're doing. So these are my comments. If artificial turf is allowed on this project, testing the artificial turf should be mandatory. There is going to be about 22 acres of plastic covering the natural ground. From our expert Kyla Bennett, testing performed should be a synthetic precipitation leaching procedure, an SPLP test, should be done first on this turf. Then a test for individual PFAS. This will show what will leach off the fields, and the detection limits must be low enough to detect PFAS in the lower parts per trillion, not parts per billion, as was stated by the applicant. Most artificial turf material has PFAS, PFOAs, and other chemicals that are used or make their way into the manufactured product, including various VOCs, SOCs, lead, and others. The applicant should provide additional independent laboratory testing of these products to ensure other chemicals used in the manufacture of the plastic carpet are not present at dangerous levels. Can the applicant provide studies that the additional chemicals and microplastics entering our waterways from the plastic turf will not impact local habitat or habitats many miles from this project, as these foreign micro and nanoparticles infiltrate and pollute everything downstream and along the Connecticut River in Long Island Sound? Studies already show this is happening. I have provided documentation previously from UMass Lowell that going with natural organic turf fields is a viable alternative being practiced successfully right in our own backyard in Springfield, Massachusetts, and many other locations around the world. This is not a new idea. I urge IWWA to consider banning artificial turf and insist on the organic turf field alternative. Microplastics do not undergo biodegradation, and as such may persist in the environment for hundreds of years as a form of pollution. Not surprisingly, they have been found to accumulate in oceans, fresh water, food, and drinking water. Ingestion or inhalation of microplastics and the chemicals associated with them exerts adverse effects on humans and the environment. Another environmental concern is the migration of the synthetic particles into the surrounding environment. Broken synthetic grass fibers do not stay limited to the boundaries of the artificial turf fields. How many soccer players have come home with grass blades in their shoes, socks, and uniforms? This property has been the subject of various hearings in the past. Each time, wetlands were impacted and compromises were made. The natural habitat and wetlands all throughout the previous and current developments have been permanently altered. When is enough enough? To get a perspective on the size of the fields, take a look at the last page of my comments. I urge you to deny this development as presented. It will cause permanent damage to the wetland, watercourse, and the environment due to the approximately 22 acres of plastic turf as it breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces of plastic pollution over its lifetime. And what I did is I created a drawing. I took the town's GIS system, took the measurements off the plan, and put it over the town of Enfield building, this part right here, this property. And it goes from the town hall property up to Alden Avenue, all the way down to White Street, encompasses that whole area from Alden Avenue almost all the way to Lincoln Street, and then all the way back, including Olive Higgins Park. So it gives you kind of a perspective of how big this plastic field is going to be. So, thank you, and I hope you've listened well.
Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Thank you. Signed up. Seeing none? Any applicants come forward?
Thank you again. For the record, Carl Landolina. First, while I was sitting there taking notes, I did happen to find the actual receipts from the post office, not the green cards, but this proves that the letters did in fact go out to Connecticut Water Company and to Department of Public Health. So I took pictures from my phone. I'll put those in the file, and then I'll give these to staff. So I guess I'll take there's a letter also from Mr. Cody, and maybe that's the letter that was read by the other representative from the Conservation Commission dated today. It sounds like what the person from the Conservation Commission had to say. They were happy about the taking out of the chrome or the crumb rubber infill, and then they were wondering about whether there are any PFASs used in the extruding process. There are not. There's a letter in the file from Tenkate that said they removed all of the PFAS materials and processes in the last 4 years from their manufacturing process. So nothing in the factory where this stuff is made, it's all PFAS free. Now, there's one thing. I think there is a letter from me which talks about testing in parts per billion. That's a typo, and that's my fault. It's actually the test that we gave you that said no PFAS was parts per million, but neither one of them went to parts per trillion, which is what we're discussing with, and we understand the new EPA guidelines and the burden it places on Connecticut Water Company, and we're, cognizant of that fact. And whether you close the public hearing tonight or not is up to you. That's your decision to make. We think that you have enough information in front of you, and there's nothing else that we can give you in terms of your jurisdictional evidence, shall we call it. If you disagree, then that's fine. But one of the other things, I don't think I ever said, because I'm, after doing this for 40 years, I'm trying to be very careful with my language. I never said that the wells at the spring wells adjacent to our property tested any levels of PFAS. What I described to you was information that I got off either, I think it was the Department of Public Health, because Connecticut Water Company files annual or semi-annual or reports. And so the Great Western Fields, which this is part of, which has fields and wells and fields in a number of towns, there were levels that were above 4 parts per trillion. What I think I said is you can't tell from reading that information what specific wells had those levels. So I never said, or if I did indicate that, it was a misstatement, but I don't think I said that.
I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah. So I don't know what only Connecticut Water Company perhaps, and maybe some other agencies know the exact levels of anything in any of the specific wells. The report that I found wasn't broken down into locations or wells. So, and I'm not suggesting that they should provide that information to you or anybody else. I mean, they know, in order to comply with the new EPA regulations, where they're going to have to do things and what those things are that are going to be needed. So, and again, yes, they have asked us to test more than just the field. They want to know what the there's going to be a shock pad, right? They want to know, stuff about that as well. And again, those materials don't belong to us, and we're trying to get permission from the manufacturer. And I did mention the pre and post water quality testing, which is one thing, but along with that, which they didn't say, and it's in their letter, is that they want assurances, i.e. financial assurances, that if it tests above the 4 parts per trillion, that we're going to basically say we have strict liability, and whatever those numbers are is a direct cause of something that we've done, or the fields or something like that, which is hard for us to, do that, given that this stuff falls out of the sky. So we don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're saying, yeah, if the levels go up past the 4 parts per trillion, we admit it's our fault and didn't come from anywhere else, and we're going to hold you harmless and do something to make you financially whole. I can't see us ever doing that. I understand the ask, and that's, so that's part of why they want to do the pre and post water quality testing. Somebody else mentioned about recycling. Well, I think there's enough evidence. Mr. Hubbard testified, this is TenCate is a large worldwide organization. They partner with Exxon, and, it's not like this stuff goes in a landfill and is, their particular product, which is, again, a 12-year warranty, which is probably twice or 150% of what everyone else is offering, this new product. That's how safe they think it is, and wearable and all the rest of it. And it's recycled safely. I can't speak for anybody else, any other manufacturer. But our TenCate's products are recycled safely. The other thing is, every time I've ever had carpet installed in my house, and I'm sure most of you have at least one room with carpeting, after the guy leaves, there's little bits of yarn, right, from the cutting and the putting together and all of that. And this process is going to be the same. It's vacuumed up, but we have talked to, I think, staff about this, and maybe Connecticut Water. We're agreeing to increase our maintenance of the MDC chambers, where this stuff is going to end up and float in between the two pipes that outlet. So we're going to step up our maintenance of those the first 6 months, because that's when most of this would be shedding off, just like your house. Your carpet might shed, mostly when they're cutting it and putting it down, and then after that it might shed a little bit, depending on the nature of the. But we agree that's going to make its way into the notes on the final plan. So, I don't know what else to tell you. We think you've got enough information. That's a decision you'll make before we go home tonight, I guess. But, to ban artificial turf, that's way outside of your, if the EPA, the federal government does that, or states do that, that's something I guess we'll have to deal with in the future. But, for you to put that in your regulations, I think you'd be hard pressed to justify that. And, we've got experts here who answered questions from you. George, right? The turf guy, Mr. Hubbard, John Furman. We brought our experts here. On the other side, we've got letters and studies, so they weren't, and the person who apparently was going to show up decided that, maybe I won't, and just sent a letter, which is fine. That's still evidence, but we sat here and we stood up to your scrutiny and your questions and all of that, and then we were happy to do it because we think this is a good project. So, as far as the retaining walls, that's another thing in Mr. Cody's letter. Obviously, we're going to hire geotechnical experts, and the retaining walls themselves are going to be part of what planning and zoning approves, and structural engineers are going to be, design is going to be, John Cabibbo is going to go over that, and he's already looked at some, and he's got some information back. So at this point, we have nothing else to share with you. I've told you things that I probably shouldn't have, but you're tired of me. And in terms of the request by Connecticut Water and DPH, that's for you to discuss.
Thank you.
We're not going to offer to continue this, but that'll be your decision to make.
That's fine. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Staff, do you have anything?
Hello. Yes. So I'm sure you received my 14-page report.
Yes, we did.
Finally had enough information to finish it. So I'm just going to skip past the old part to the new part. I gave you a recap of all the new documents that were submitted within the past 2 weeks. You've received multiple letters from CT Water, from Kim Zapla of DEEP, from the applicant, from DPH, letters from the public, and the Conservation Commission, the Garden Club, all kinds of entities. So it would just be good to, before you make a decision after you close the public hearing, just to go through your documents and make sure you have all your facts in order, because you will need reasons when we go through the motion. I gave you a little update of the turf fields. That way you had that information in front of you instead of fishing for all your info. I gave you some information on the terrace escarpment areas that were specifically addressed by John Furman about the retaining wall. I do just want to point out I was able to get some more clarification about how this retaining wall is supposed to work being in the escarpment area. So the retaining wall will be secured in place since the bases are wider than the top of the wall, which is on the detail sheet within the site plans. This results, hang on a second. This helps spread the weight of the wall out over a wider surface and results in soil-bearing pressure decreasing. This prevents it from eroding into the escarpments further. The retaining wall shows draining tiles, which won't be used from the water from the turf fields, but rather from any existing groundwater in that location. Moving forward, I went over a slight clarification about the drainage for the fields per Connecticut Water's comments and how the applicant has decided to address those comments by modifying their drainage report to those comments. The mitigation summary is new for April 9th, so that includes all your mitigation stuff, and this will be included with the application materials when you go for your motion. I did have one note that bonds may be asked for the completion of the wetlands mitigation project by the Inland Wetlands Agency. This would include all the plants and shrubs as part of that mitigation project. Mr. Landolina went over the feasible and prudent alternative analysis. I provided the definitions for you from statutes if you had any questions about what the differences were between prudent and feasible, which I think Mr. Landolina clarified for the record. And then just to help our newer members, I provided some info on the clarification of the Wetlands Agency's jurisdiction, because there's been lots of comments about the aquifer, how that relates to groundwater and stormwater quality. So I cited the applicable sections for you just to be familiar with before you make a decision. And then going forward, the sections in your regulations that you want to read through to help you make a decision on this application. And I'm not going to go through them because that could take a long time. And then the last part would be staff comments. So the engineering comment, it has been addressed by John Furman. I did not see a response from our assistant town engineer as of yet. I don't see why these comments also couldn't be addressed during PZC, since they're mostly about pipe sizes and the drainage details. All the other departments have completed their reviews. The only outstanding comment the planning department had was about the prudent and feasible alternatives, which had been discussed tonight. And then moving forward, you have your resolution recommendations. That is your choice to modify as you see fit. And then the site-specific conditions 1 through 8. So some of these conditions came from the wetlands report. Some came from Mr. Landolina's letter that addressed CT Water's letter previously. And if the applicant is okay with all them and the wetlands agency is okay with all them, then you could approve the application with those site specifics. And that is a quick synopsis of this very large report. Thank you.
That sounds good.
So would it be prudent to add a 9th site-specific condition that appropriate agreement documentation will be completed with the town to establish the agreed 15.7 acres of conservation easement, which includes much of Wetlands B.
Yes,
You could add that as a site-specific if the applicant is okay with it. It does have to go through our town attorney anyways, and it would be brought up again during planning and zoning.
right, just have it on there.
Yep. So those mitigation proposals, this is what the applicant is proposing, and it's up to you to accept those. And I would include that in your motion, should you decide to move forward, when you make a decision after the public hearing is closed, just to accept those mitigation measures.
Could we also have a site-specific, that, you know, the continuation of working with the water company to?
Yeah, how do you word that? Yeah.
How would you word it?
Perhaps
gonna ask the same
you could make the April 12th letter part of the record for Aquifer and PCC so they can see the concerns for Connecticut Water.
So there's certain things that fall into play here. Usually we don't get involved with the correspondence between the water company, DPH, and the applicant. That is all between them. We already have the site-specific about the LEP testing for Wetland A and to develop a plan to remove any contaminated soils prior to capping in place. The water company, DPH, they will also have another chance to comment and appear at a public hearing for planning and zoning as well. Again, your decision to make, but I recommend just keeping the agencies separate for now.
Okay, that's fine. So, any other questions, concerns? Do we have a motion?
Just what's the timeline? Where are we at?
So
Because we have an
Yes.
extra week in here.
today, you'd have to close the public hearing unless the applicant would be okay with another extension. I understand that DPH and Connecticut Water had asked that, but basically that has to come from the applicant.
That's a good. Right. Yeah. Right. So I personally think I'm set to close it tonight. I've heard enough, and they can, you know, if we pass it, then it would go to P&Z anyway, so.
I do want to make one note that once the public hearing is closed, no further new information can be submitted for the record. So say, for example,
Right.
DPH finally has their letter in place that they want to submit. If it comes after the closing of the public hearing, it can't be accepted into the record.
Correct. Yep. Yeah,
But it could be
Yeah.
to planning and zoning.
yeah,
Potentially, yes, as long as those issues address planning and zoning jurisdiction.
right.
But new material that comes in after we close
Close it.
to us doesn't go to PCC.
Anything for wetlands, if the public hearing is closed, cannot be submitted. And
Right,
that means
and-
that.
And we don't give it to PCC to have their own information.
That is
right?
correct. You are your own agency with your own statutes and rules to
Thank you.
abide by.
I'd like to ask a question from the folks from Connecticut Water. Would you mind? Come on.
Oh, yeah, closed it.
You didn't close the public hearing, so.
Yeah.
So this testing, that especially with the new EPA regulations, first of all, how easy is this to be done, and what's the time frame? How long would this take to be completed reasonably? I know it's a hard question. You know, you're not in that business, but
So ideally, the turf manufacturer, the developer would work with the turf manufacturer to do the testing. We would like to see results in parts per trillion. We did offer the other alternative of them providing a sample of the turf that we could do the testing ourselves. The test itself could be completed we could have results within a couple weeks. I would say 2 weeks. We could, once we have a sample that we could have that testing done, we sample significant amounts of test for PFAS, so we would be able to do that ourselves. But again, we understand the concerns by the developer, and because PFAS is everywhere, so we understand the concerns with giving the sample to us and having it become contaminated. We would just like, whether it's us or them, we would just like to see results in the parts per trillion.
I don't have anything further. Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you, I
could rush
appreciate
them.
I'm confused. I'm remembering incorrectly. I thought the applicant said there was no PFAS in their turf.
it. Yeah.
They did,
Multiple times they said
multiple
that.
times.
So,
But they had measured to parts per million, as he corrected, which is 200,000 parts per trillion. That's where our major concern lies.
okay, now I better
And if we can
understand it.
address that, I think when we talk about that stormwater and doing that pre and post, that's really just to protect both of us. It's to ensure that what's coming off is, if pre-construction, if there's PFAS already there, that the developer does not, then post-construction, which to protect both of us so that we don't say that there's anything coming from their development that's not, and that they're not, adding PFAS to the aquifer protection area.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I
you.
appreciate it.
I'm going to sit down. I'm going to be here for Carl Andalena. The test that we provided was in parts per million, but the number was 0. So I don't know where the 2 got inserted somewhere. And is that correct, Alan?
Yeah, the test report is on the public record at 0, non-detection at parts per million.
Right, which is not what, the parts per trillion, obviously, but, so I don't know where 2 parts per million came in and then calculated to 20,000 parts per trillion. I understand the math, but I just don't know where that 2 number came from, but that's what's on the record.
So is that what fluorine is? Is because no, I know, yeah. You don't get paid enough for that, right? Because the report says test results, it says fluorine content, MDL equals 1.0 parts per million, ppm. It doesn't say PFOBs. Oh, no, it says fluorine content none detected, but it doesn't say PFOBs.
Must be in one of the other.
You have to get up here.
Make sure it's the right report.
Yeah, maybe this is the wrong report, but this is the test report.
Correct. And, again, I'm not Alan Hubbard with Athletic Fields of America and Tenkati. I'm not a PFAS expert, but I believe fluorine is a type of PFAS. I believe that the technical name for PFAS is polyfluorine. I'm not sure of the whole technical name.
Okay, I see it. It's on the cover page.
Yes.
Polyfluoroalkyl substances.
Exactly. So the test report shows at the detection level in parts per million of 0.
Okay, yeah, it says none detected.
Yes.
It doesn't say 0, it says none.
None detected, yes, okay. Yep. And there's also a letter on the public record as well from my company saying that in the past 4 years, we've removed all PFAS from our manufacturing process and from our supply chain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I will make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Ginny, yeah.
Close public hearing. Any discussion?
No.
Hearing none, roll call, please.
Donna Corbin Sabinski.
Yes.
Kevin Zorda.
Yes.
Virginia Higley, yes. Kelly Hemler.
Yes.
Dylan Bridge.
Yes.
Nancy Martin.
Yes.
Ken Kaufman.
Yes.
7 in favor, motion passes. So the public hearing is now closed. So, do we want to have a discussion? I personally, I want to thank the applicant and their team for listening to the concerns of the neighbors, the towns, the water company, the staff, us. It's come a long way, a lot of changes since we began this whole process. I'm happy to see how you modified your plans many times over. You reduced the size of the basketball building to minimize the impact of the wetlands. You redirected the storm and water drainage and management systems. You changed the turf from the original to this new Tenacati turf, which is fully recyclable and most importantly, safer for the environment, for the players and anybody who encounters it. The various mitigation efforts with innovative solutions and ideas. I like the step wetlands idea, the escarpments, how you're gonna, take care of those, creating the vernal pool, fixing the beaver dams, helping with the pond cleanup and the debris and the invasive shrubs, putting some of the property into conservation easements and so on. I think you've done a great job in coming up with all these great ideas for the wetlands. Also, I think a very important piece is that you're working with the water company. And I hope you'll continue working together to ensure that we have safe water for the town of Enfield and wherever it goes. Overall, I believe it's going to be a nice addition to the town, having a state-of-the-art athletic facility, which will bring many visitors to the town and a place for residents to watch some great tournaments. For soccer, soccer is a big part of the town. And I think it could be utilized by the town and everybody. With that being said, I believe you met our regulations and you have a plan that fits for the best of the property. So thank you very much for working with us and getting to this point. Anybody else have any?
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think most of the biggest concerns that we had, especially in the beginning with the crumb rubber, right off the bat, that was my biggest thing. And I think making that switch was a big switch, and I do appreciate that. I know there's still these concern with the PFAS and the higher standards that the EPA now has, and I'm sure it's not going. That concern is not going to end here. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be a concern, and I think that it's not going to end with our commission. That it's going to continue with the next as you go through that steps, and it's my hope that you can continue working with Connecticut Water, and perhaps Tenacati will get that testing done prior to that process occurring. And I think there's plenty of time. It's been established that there's plenty of time for that to happen. And I would hope that Tenacati would want that to happen to make sure that their product is safe. And, they do a lot, and they're, especially with the recycling, that if they want to stay state of the art, that they would do that.
I just wanted to say I agree, and I think it's paramount that you work with Connecticut Water to ensure that aquifer is safe. I am a big water drinker, so I want to make sure myself and others are protected.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I want to echo what my fellow commissioners have said. I hope that the talks with Connecticut Water will continue, because that has a lot of weight. Thank you.
I'd like to also add, I did, obviously play devil's advocate a little bit. I was a little skeptical on some things, but you guys were very accommodating with people's concerns, questions regarding the public. And you made a lot of amendments that I didn't even think could be possible. It was really, this stuff is revolutionary, and I hope to see good things out of it. So, along seconding everyone else, I hope that, we can find a common ground with this, the water issue, and I guess we'll hope for the best here, so.
I might need a couple breaths for this one.
So, just to reiterate, don't forget, after you make your motion, if you're taking action tonight, each member must state their reasons for their decision and the findings of prudent and feasible alternatives, just to help you with your motions.
Thank you. All right. I will make a motion to approve IW number 696, 85 and 100 Bright Meadow Boulevard and 113 Brainerd Road. Application for a wetlands permit for regulated activities in connection with the development of a sports complex and associated uses. Fast Track Realty applicant, Mass Mutual Life Insurance Company, owners of 85 and 100 Bright Meadow Boulevard, and John R. and Patricia C. Fiera, owners of 113 Brainerd Road, maps 35, lots 44 and 220, and map 36, lot 237, BR and R33 zones, based on the findings of, we have to do it as one? Okay, individually.
Yeah, you can do it as a group.
Okay. Based on the findings of, that the applicant made prudent and feasible alternatives and made changes that dealt with the issues brought forward by members of the public as well as the commission. Is that good? What else?
Second?
Jenny seconded it? Okay.
Second?
She seconded it. So we have first and a second. Any discussion? No.
Can we use Donna's comments as reasons why we're going forward with it?
I would reiterate them to have them in the motion. And just mention the findings of no, the findings of no other.
That's good. Yes, you
The
did.
findings of no other prudent, feasible alternatives.
I'm sorry, yeah,
This
as-
is the most sound alternative. That's what you meant to say.
As amended, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know.
Okay. Yes, I'll read it. So roll call.
Donna Corbin Savinsky.
Yes, stop. Okay, so, this is for prudent and reasonable findings and alternatives. Mine is, because they've gone above and beyond to, they listen to the public, they listen to the water company, they listen to us, they listen to the staff. They've looked at everything to make it the best possible solution for the property. They reduced the size of the basketball buildings and redirected the storm drains and management systems. They went with a different turf that was fully recyclable and safer for the environment and for the players and everybody. All the different various mitigation efforts that you put into place and plan on doing for us, working with everybody. I just think you looked at all the different various options with the property and came up with the best solution possible to help with the wetlands and make it better. Actually, you're going to make it better, a lot of the wetlands better. So I think they met the requirement for prudent and feasible. Continue?
Kevin Zorda.
I will say yes as well. Similarly, I believe that you did find prudent and reasonable mitigations and alternatives to some of the issues that we brought forth, specifically the crumb rubber that I just mentioned and many of the design aspects. I believe the creation of wetlands and some unique ones and some challenging situations, creating the vernal pool, and contributing to the community in other places. So not just at your site, but helping with the dredging. That's significant. So I believe that it's met our regulations and should move forward.
Virginia Higley. I agree with both Donna and Kevin's sentiments, and I'd like to say that any water concerns for the aquifer hopefully will be addressed during the aquifer presentation before planning and zoning. I vote yes.
Next.
Kelly Hemler?
I vote yes. The mitigations to improve wetlands B have been very impressive. I appreciate the vernal pool, the removal of the dump especially, and the invasive vegetation. I hope that the negotiations will continue in good faith with the Connecticut Water, because obviously water is important to the community. And as amended, the plan, I believe, is prudent and reasonable. Thank you.
Dylan Bridge?
I'm going to say yes. I really appreciate how you guys made, again, special accommodations for both the public and all the agencies that you're dealing with very professionally. I do believe that you guys are, you have eco-friendly alternatives in mind, like replacing the turf with a much more desirable material than the ones that have been talked about by members of the public. I see the town and surrounding areas, including parts of Massachusetts, benefiting from this area, from a bunch of economic standpoints as well. I like to see Mr. Furman mentioned that we're going to be recycling some of the current materials that are part of the area, as well as the concrete and the base thing. That's really exciting to see. I was really surprised by you guys' ability to help in the aiding of the dredging costs, and I find that very respectable and noble for taxpayers and people of the town. And I wish the best of luck to all you guys during your journey with the other committees and any agencies, along with Connecticut Water, on finding, again, some sort of common ground that we can all reach and be happy with. So,
Nancy Martin?
Yes. I also concur what everyone has said. We've done a lot of listening, and I appreciate all of your efforts, particularly the piece about the mitigation strategies overall. And I'm looking forward to seeing all of those and seeing how they work for future reference. And again, I'm just going to reiterate the importance of the continued discussions with Connecticut Water and making sure that our aquifer is protected, but I am a yes.
Ken Kaufman?
I'd like to vote yes also, and now I know why you guys are in the center and I'm the last, but I'll say everything that I have. The one thing I really like, the older Beaver Dam isn't being removed, correct? I love that. The downsizing of the basketball courts and the creation of the step wetlands, and then the vernal pool. I can't wait to see that. Hopefully go down there sometime without falling. The removal of the invasives and the planting of the shrubs, I think that's pretty huge. And then the money for the freshwater pond, that's also for the taxpayers. That's a huge thing also. And that's all pretty much I have to say. Thank you.
So motion passes, 7 in favor, none against. And,
Wait, site specifics.
Oh,
Site specifics.
Okay, you're right, thank you.
You didn't say that
I
part.
didn't read all those, I stopped.
We stopped, so we get all the vote.
Thank you, thank you. So I will amend my,
We'll add the site specifics.
to include the site-specific conditions of, number one, an applicant, that's why she gets paid all the big money.
I don't get paid that much.
The applicant will submit post-construction functions and values assessment of wetlands B. 2, a 3-year monitoring reports will be submitted annually for the vernal pool, the lower Beaver Dam removal portion of Waterworks Brook, and step wetlands creations. The wetlands professional has the discretion to extend the monitoring period for an additional year at the end of year 3. Number 3, signed permission from the Fairfield Inn owner is required prior to Lower Beaver Dam removal. This signed permission form shall be submitted to the Wetlands Agency's duly authorized agent. For the construction of Field 11 and the retaining wall, work will be supervised by a geotechnical engineer. Number 5, all wetland mitigation work shall be supervised by the applicant's soil scientist, including initial grading, planting, marking invasives in adjacent upland areas. A pre-implementation meeting shall take place at least 1 month prior to the plan implementation between the applicant's soil scientist, the site contractor, the landscaper, and the town's wetland agent. A wetlands mitigation bond shall be posted prior to any building permit approvals. The applicant will engage an LEP to sample the soils in wetland A and develop a plan to remove any contaminated soils prior to capping in place. Number 8, informational signage will be installed by the step wetland and the vernal pool locations. And number 9, appropriate agreement documentation will be completed with the town attorney to establish the agreed 15.7 acres of conservation easement, which includes much of Wetlands B.
And don't forget the one about accepting their mitigation proposals as proposed from the 4924 REMA report.
Okay, and number 10, that we accept the mitigation proposals as specified in
their REMA report.
By the REMA report.
4924.
4924.
Perfect.
As amended.
Oh, I was the second.
Yep. So we're good. So motion still passes. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your, and ladies. Can we get a tour afterwards of the vernal pool and the
We'd love to see how it comes out.
Yeah. I would love to see it though
Carl.
afterwards.
We got more to do here. Let's go.
Carl, do you want this?
I need a piece of turf.
Okay. Shh. Yeah. Folks, we have to finish our meeting, so
More minutes.
sorry, not to.
Break up.
Yep.
Thank you. So next on our agenda is the enforcement reports. Do we have none?
I got a notice from the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection that they issued a notice of violation to the property owner of 83 First Avenue.
Oh, okay.
That's the stream one?
Yeah.
The brook.
The brook one,
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah, that's a big one. Planning staff report?
Oh, I have one thing. Oh, it's an empty room now. No one to stay for my report. Okay, before I get up. We received a letter yesterday from the Connecticut Siting Council. Do you recall, well, new members might not recall, but a lot of meetings ago, I brought to your attention a potential for a public hearing at the Siting Council for the property over at 141 Town Farm Road that is owned by Raffia Farms. And they had that farm pond. Their site plan showed their solar panels outside the upland from that farm pond. The letter that we got in the mail was information about how to join the public hearing. I do want to let you know the town applied for intervening status. So I know the town council plans to move forward with that. And then we have separate residents who live in the area who also applied for intervening status. But should the Wetlands Agency find themselves interested in the public hearing process and what the Siting Council does, these are the instructions to join the public hearing, which is on May 16th, 2024. The evidentiary session starts at 2 p.m. That is no public comment, just reviewing the plan. Public comment session would be at 6:30 p.m. That's a remote public hearing. So I have these for you, and that is all I had.
That's all you have. Thank you very much. So applications to be received is IW 699, 75 Oliver Road, application for a wetland permit for the new construction of a single-family home. Huron Homes LLC applicant, Town of Enfield owner, map 47, lot 63, R44 zone.
I do want to point out one thing about that application. You may have noticed that you did not receive the actual application copy. When the applicant submitted the application last week, he submitted it with the entire property of 75 Oliver and 90 Post Office Road. He did not take into consideration the 2021 lot line reconfiguration, which I supplied to him previously. They revised their plans appropriately and their narrative. I'm just waiting for them to revise the actual application itself for the numbers of wetlands disturbance and impacts, and the other information that's on the report that we need when we do our deep referrals at the end of the month.
Okay. So we'll have all the new stuff. Next is miscellaneous. Anybody have anything? Motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Nancy, motion, Ginny seconded it. All in favor? Aye. Meeting's adjourned, and it's 9:20.